Back in 1993, a family comedy dropped and had people laughing 1 minute and tearing up the next. Mrs. Doubtfire didn't just become a hit, it turned into one of the most loved movies of the entire decade. But what went on behind the scenes? Way more chaotic than you'd expect. Robin Williams didn't just play Daniel Hillard, he went completely off script, firing off non-stop improv like a machine. The crew had to roll nearly 2 million feet of film just trying to catch all his wild jokes and unpredictable moments. And that famous melting cake scene, total accident. But Williams flipped it into pure comedy magic in seconds. And trust this, that's just scratching the surface. This movie is packed with secrets, surprises, and behind-the-scenes moments that most fans have never even heard about. Today we're diving into 15 crazy facts about Mrs. Doubtfire. Number 1. Robin Williams turned the set into a 2 million foot comedy explosion. Robin Williams didn't just act in Mrs. Doubtfire, he completely took over every single scene with non-stop energy. The crew had no choice but to keep those cameras rolling, burning through nearly 2 million feet of film just to keep up with him. That was a wild amount for the 1990s, especially when film was expensive and every extra take meant more money going out. Williams would start things off clean and focused, giving 3 to 4 takes exactly as written, sharp, smooth, and right on cue. But once director Chris Columbus locked in the safe version, everything changed. That's when Williams unleashed his improv, switching up lines, voices, and reactions every single time. No 2 takes ever felt the same, and things could flip in seconds. To keep up with the chaos, Columbus often had 4 cameras rolling at once, trying to catch every unpredictable moment. And it wasn't just about filming Williams, he made sure to capture the rest of the cast too, especially as they struggled hard not to break character while all this madness was happening right in front of them. Some scenes stretched to 15, even 22 takes, not because of mistakes, but because Robin just wouldn't stop until every idea in his head came out. It felt less like filming a movie and more like watching a live comedy show explode on set. Meanwhile, the script supervisor had a stressful job, racing to write down every improvised line as fast as possible, trying to keep up while the script basically turned into a playground for spontaneous comedy. By the end of it all, there was enough footage for multiple versions of the film, a PG, a PG-13, and even a more edgy R-rated cut, packed with bolder improv and all those extra jokes, alternate takes, and unseen moments. They're still sitting locked away in climate-controlled archives, untouched and rarely seen. Number 2. The melting mass disaster that turned into an iconic moment. One of the most unforgettable scenes in Mrs. Doubtfire, that wild moment when the frosting starts sliding off Mrs. Doubtfire's face, was never supposed to happen like that. The original plan was simple. Daniel would shove his face into a cake to hide the fact he wasn't wearing his prosthetic mask when the social worker suddenly showed up. But things didn't go as planned at all. Under those hot studio lights, the frosting started melting way faster than anyone expected, dripping down his face and turning a quick fix into a total mess. It kept getting worse. The icing slid, dripped off his chin, and completely ruined the disguise in real time. And then came the moment nobody could have predicted. A chunk of frosting dropped right into the social worker's tea. Most actors would have frozen right there, but not Robin Williams. He stayed fully in character and fired back instantly with the line, "There you go. You've got your cream and sugar now." That line wasn't in the script and the moment wasn't rehearsed, it was all pure improv magic director Chris Columbus made. The smart call to keep the cameras rolling instead of yelling cut. That split-second decision turned a total accident into one of the most legendary and quoted scenes in the entire film. Number 3. Robin Williams took Mrs. Doubtfire into the real world and nobody had a clue. Between filming days, Robin Williams didn't just sit around, he actually walked out into the city fully dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire to test how convincing the disguise really was, and somehow nobody recognized him. The transformation was so realistic that even his own son didn't realize it was him on set, until he heard that unmistakable voice cut through the costume. That's when it finally clicked, proving just how next level the makeup really was. But he didn't stop at simple walks. One of the most shocking stories from offset is when Williams walked into an adult shop completely in character, wig, glasses, outfit, everything locked in. He stayed committed to the role the entire time, speaking and acting just like Mrs. Doubtfire while browsing inside. The employee had no idea who they were talking to and just treated him like any regular customer, trying to help as politely as possible. It wasn't until Williams suddenly dropped the voice and revealed who he really was that the whole situation flipped. The realization hit, and the clerk burst out laughing at the unexpected moment. Number 4. Lisa Jacob was kicked out of school for being in the movie. Playing Lydia came with a real-life price for Lisa Jacob, and it hit hard. At just 14 years old, the Toronto ninth grader landed a major role in Mrs. Doubtfire, but balancing Hollywood and school turned into a serious struggle. She wasn't slacking at all. Lisa worked with a tutor on set, kept up with her assignments, and even mailed her schoolwork back home while filming in California. She did everything she could to stay on track, but her school didn't see it that way. Even though her absences were for a huge film project, the school stuck to strict rules. She later received a letter saying she wasn't allowed to return because she had missed too many days. No exceptions. It was a crushing moment, and she was completely devastated by the decision. When Robin Williams heard about it, he didn't stay quiet. He personally wrote a heartfelt letter to the principal, asking them to reconsider and support her education instead of punishing her for such a rare opportunity. He really tried to step in and make a difference, but the answer didn't change. The principal still refused to let her come back, and in a twist that shocked many, the letter from Robin Williams was reportedly framed and hung up in the office instead. Lisa never returned to that school, and she later opened up about how painful it was to lose that normal teenage experience while chasing something so big. Number 5. A Looney Tunes legend secretly created the opening cartoon. The animated intro of Mrs. Doubtfire wasn't just some random cartoon. It was crafted by one of the biggest names in animation history. The scene featuring Pudgy the parakeet and Grunge the cat was designed by Chuck Jones, the mastermind behind iconic characters like Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and the Roadrunner. That's a serious animation legend stepping into the film. Director Chris Columbus didn't want a basic opening. He wanted something creative, nostalgic, and impossible to forget. And Chuck Jones didn't come alone either. He brought in a stacked team of animation pros, including veterans like Bill Littlejohn and Tom Ray, plus rising talent Eric Goldberg, who was also working on the genie in Aladdin, another character voiced by Robin Williams. The team actually created nearly 5 full minutes of animated footage. But here's the twist, a big chunk of it never made it into the final cut. Extended versions were later released as bonus content, giving fans a glimpse of what was left out. And the intro wasn't just for fun, it set up Daniel's character perfectly. In the story, he refuses to voice lines because Pudgy, the parakeet, is shown smoking a cigarette. That decision gets him fired on the spot, instantly showing one key truth. He's got strong morals, but his judgment can seriously backfire. Number 6. The Mrs. Doubtfire transformation was a daily 4-hour marathon. Turning Robin Williams into Mrs. Doubtfire wasn't quick or easy. It was a full-on endurance test every single day. The process took around 4 to 4.5 hours, and this wasn't just simple makeup. It involved 8 separate foam latex prosthetic pieces, all carefully placed and blended together to transform his face into a believable older Scottish nanny. Every detail had to line up perfectly or the illusion wouldn't work, and it didn't stop there. After the face came the full transformation, body padding, a full suit, wig, and layers of stipple paint to create realistic skin texture, wrinkles, and age spots. It was a complete overhaul from head to toe. For most of that time, Williams had to sit still with his head tilted back while the makeup team worked with intense focus. To keep him from getting bored, the crew even mounted a TV on the ceiling so he could watch movies while they worked on him. The effort paid off big time. The makeup team's incredible work earned them the 1994 Academy Award for Best Makeup, proving just how impressive the transformation really was. But it wasn't all smooth. Williams was known to sweat heavily, which made the job even tougher. Every seam had to be sealed perfectly or the prosthetics could start breaking down under the hot studio lights. Williams even joked about the experience, once saying it felt like being trapped inside the world's largest condom. And on especially hot days, the whole setup would start to soften, turning each scene into a race against time before everything began to slip. Number 7. The studio wanted a totally different ending, and it almost changed everything. The emotional ending everyone remembers from Mrs. Doubtfire, it nearly got replaced with something way more predictable. Original screenwriter Randy Mayhem Singer wrote the story with a realistic finish. Daniel and Miranda stay divorced but learn to co-parent in a mature, healthy way. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was real life, and that's what made it hit so hard. But the studio had other plans. 20th Century Fox pushed for a classic Hollywood ending where the parents get back together and the family magically reunites. A clean, happy wrap-up, but honestly, way less real. That idea didn't sit right with the people actually making the film. The director and main cast had all experienced divorce in real life, and they strongly believed the movie shouldn't send the message that every broken family just fixes itself if you hope hard enough. Robin Williams stood firm on this. He wanted the story to stay honest and not drift into fantasy. At one point, the Studio even brought in another writer to reshape the ending into something more traditional, but the pushback was strong. The cast and director didn't back down, and eventually the studio gave in, allowing the original ending to stay. That decision changed everything. It gave the film one of its most powerful messages. Families don't have to look perfect to be full of love. And that final scene where Mrs. Doubtfire speaks directly to kids about different kinds of families only exists because the team fought hard to keep the story real instead of picture perfect. Number 8. Pierce Brosnan's character was almost a villain, and it would have changed everything. At first, Stu wasn't just Miranda's new partner. He was written as the bad guy of the whole story. In the early script, Stu was way more scheming and selfish. He supposedly wanted Daniel out of the picture completely, even pushing the idea of sending the kids off to boarding school so he could have Miranda all to himself. That version of Stu was sneaky, controlling, and easy to hate. Basically the classic evil stepdad setup. But the director quickly realized something felt off. That kind of storyline was too simple and way too cartoon-like for a movie that was supposed to feel real. Mrs. Doubtfire was never about taking down a villain. It was about a flawed father dealing with the consequences of his own choices. So everything changed. Stu was completely rewritten into someone kind, patient, emotionally steady, and genuinely good with the kids. Instead of being the enemy, he became the total opposite of Daniel. Calm where Daniel was chaotic, thoughtful where Daniel was impulsive, and that shift made the story hit way harder. Now Daniel's jealousy didn't come from hating a bad guy, it came from his own insecurity. Stu wasn't stealing his family, he was just being a solid, decent person, and that made things way more complicated. Interestingly, one small piece of the original version still slipped through. In the poolside scene, Stu calls Daniel a loser, a sharp line left over from when his character was more aggressive. There was even a deleted scene where Daniel apologizes to Stu for his behavior, showing clearly that Stu was never the real problem. The truth is, Daniel was fighting himself the whole time, and that's what made the story feel so real. Number 9. Robin Williams shut down filming so Sally Field could grieve. One of the most powerful behind-the-scenes moments from Mrs. Doubtfire had nothing to do with cameras or scripts. It was completely real and deeply human. While filming the intense courtroom custody scene, Sally Field received heartbreaking news that her father had passed away from a sudden stroke. Even with that pain, she tried to push through and return to set, not wanting to slow down production. But Robin Williams noticed right away that something wasn't right. The moment she told him what happened, he didn't hesitate. For a second, as both the star and a producer on the film, Williams went straight to director Chris Columbus and made the call to stop filming immediately. No delays, no questions, everything paused on the spot. The schedule was quickly rearranged so Sally Field could leave and be with her family during such a painful time. It was a move that showed real care, not just professionalism. She later described Williams as incredibly intuitive, someone who could sense when something was off and actually step in to help instead of just saying kind words. It wasn't a scene in the movie, but it was a moment that meant everything behind the scenes, a quiet act of compassion that left a lasting impression on everyone who saw it happen. Number 10. Mrs. Doubtfire was inspired by a real person from Edinburgh, and the truth behind it is surprisingly unexpected. The beloved character didn't just come from imagination alone, her roots trace back to a real-life figure with a very unusual reputation. In Edinburgh, there was a shopkeeper named Coots, widely known by locals as Madame Doubtfire. Her secondhand shop was packed wall to wall with random treasures, old clothes, and even cats roaming around, creating a chaotic but unforgettable atmosphere that people couldn't stop talking about. Nearby author Anne Fine often passed by this shop, and she became fascinated by the woman's bold personality, mystery, and strange charm. That real-life inspiration stayed with her and eventually helped shape her novel, alias Madame Doubtfire, which later became the foundation for the film. When the movie was developed, Robin Williams also added his own personal touches. He drew inspiration from his childhood nanny and blended it with a soft Scottish tone that helped bring Mrs. Doubtfire to life in a way that felt warm and believable. The real Madame Doubtfire passed away in 1979, never knowing that her name and spirit would eventually live on through one of the most iconic family films of the 1990s. Number 11. Mrs. Doubtfire's look was carefully designed to feel like a real grandmother, not a costume, and definitely not a cheap disguise. Director Chris Columbus was very clear from the start that he didn't want audiences to see a man in drag, but instead to genuinely believe Mrs. Doubtfire was a warm, believable older woman. The goal sounded simple, but it was actually extremely difficult. The design team studied hundreds of vintage photographs, searching for the perfect grandmother face that felt kind, natural, and trustworthy. Eventually, they found a 1940s portrait of an older English woman with a soft, proper, and deeply comforting expression. That single image became the blueprint for everything. Every detail, facial structure, warmth, styling, even subtle aging cues was reverse engineered from that photo. It all came together with the award-winning prosthetics and Robin Williams' performance to create something incredibly convincing. The final result was so effective that many viewers completely forgot they were even watching heavy makeup at all. Number 12. The cast of Mrs. Doubtfire could have been completely different, and the whole movie might have changed with it. The original author, Anne Fine, who wrote Alias Madame Doubtfire, actually imagined Warren Beatty as Daniel in early discussions. That version would have turned the story into something much more serious and dramatic, almost unrecognizable compared to the film we know today. But the studio had other ideas. At one point, one of the top picks was Tim Allen, who was massively popular from Home Improvement. That would have created a safer, more traditional family comedy, but possibly without the emotional chaos that made the final film so unforgettable. Other big names were reportedly in the mix too: Mel Gibson, Tom Hanks, Bill Murray, and Chevy Chase. Each actor would have taken the character in a completely different direction, changing the tone entirely, but everything shifted when Robin Williams got the role. His performance transformed Daniel into something no one else could replicate. Wild, emotional, unpredictable, and deeply human all at once. Even the rest of the cast almost looked different. Director Chris Columbus initially wanted Catherine O'Hara for Miranda after working with her on Home Alone. Kirstie Alley was also considered but couldn't commit due to scheduling conflicts. Eventually, Sally Fields stepped in, and her grounded emotional performance became the perfect balance to Williams' chaos, keeping the story heartfelt instead of spiraling out of control. Even the kids' casting changed the outcome. A young Blake Lively auditioned for Natalie, but the role ultimately went to Mara Wilson, who became an iconic part of the film. In the end, every casting choice shaped the movie into something completely unique, and without those final decisions, Mrs. Doubtfire might have turned out like a totally different story. Number 13. A Mrs. Doubtfire 2 almost happened multiple times, and it kept slipping away. Hollywood tried for more than a decade to bring Daniel back in disguise, but every attempt ran into major roadblocks. The first serious effort came in 2001, when writer and actress Bonnie Hunt was brought in to draft a sequel script. But by 2006, the project had already stalled, and Robin Williams himself admitted it just wasn't working. Neither he nor director Chris Columbus wanted to force a continuation that didn't have real emotional weight. The issue was clear: the original story already had its emotional ending. Daniel's secret was out, the family arc was resolved, and bringing back the disguise idea again felt unnecessary and forced. So the project drifted for years in development limbo until 2014, when a new script finally got both Williams and Columbus interested again. Williams reportedly had a practical concern: he didn't want to spend as much exhausting time in the heavy prosthetic makeup again, especially as he got older. But tragically, before anything could move forward, Robin Williams passed away in August 2014. With his death, the sequel was immediately shelved and never revisited again, leaving it as one of Hollywood's most emotional what-if stories. Number 14. The custody battle in Mrs. Doubtfire sparked real conversations about fathers' rights in a powerful way. The film didn't inspire anyone to copy the disguise idea, but it did strike a nerve with many divorced fathers who felt pushed aside in custody situations. Daniel is shown as a loving, deeply devoted dad who loses primary custody because he's unemployed and living in unstable circumstances. The judge even states in the film that custody rulings have historically leaned toward mothers, and that line landed heavily with audiences back in 1993. For many viewers, this wasn't just a movie moment, it felt real. Legal experts and family law attorneys have since pointed to the film as both a reflection of frustration and a warning about how not to handle custody disputes. One thing is clear: deception and identity fraud are completely destructive approaches. Still, Daniel's desperation is what made the story connect so strongly. He wasn't written as a villain. He was flawed, immature, and reckless, but also undeniably loving and committed to his kids. That emotional tension resonated with fathers who felt the system didn't always fully recognize their role in parenting. Over time, the film became part of a broader cultural conversation about shared custody, modern fatherhood, and the emotional complexity of divorce, all wrapped in humor, chaos, and a very convincing Scottish accent. Number 15. Some emotional scenes were cut from Mrs. Doubtfire, and they could have changed how the whole story felt. The movie almost had even more heartbreaking moments that went deeper into the pain and tension of divorce, showing the messy reality of family separation in a much rawer way, but those scenes were eventually removed to keep the film fast-paced, funny, and more accessible for audiences. Still, one major deleted scene stands out above the rest. It showed Daniel confronting his own jealousy and mistakes in a very direct way. In that moment, he apologizes to Stu, Miranda's calm and kind new partner, and it completely shifts how you see his character. Instead of just chaos and comedy, the scene reveals Daniel reflecting on his behavior and finally realizing where he went wrong. It would have added a powerful emotional layer, showing growth, accountability, and real self-awareness. Sadly, it never made the final cut, but it would have given audiences a very different side of Daniel, less of just a frantic dad in disguise, and more of a man trying to face his own flaws and rebuild himself. At its core, the story makes it clear that Stu wasn't the real problem at all. It was Daniel's struggle with his own actions, emotions, and choices that drove everything forward. Original word count 48, rewritten word count 103. Now be sure to smash that like button if you enjoyed this video on $21, because things like this get wild when you really look behind the scenes. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any more deep dives like this one. Got any crazy facts or video ideas you want next? Drop them in the comments down below and let's run it up together. Thanks for watching, stay locked in, and I'll catch you in the next one.